Imagine walking into the throne room of a king. To kill him. No soldiers. No battle cry. Just you, a hidden blade, and a lie so convincing the king sends everyone else out of the room, right before you use it. This isn't a spy movie. This is the Bible. It's the story of a man named Ehud, a left-handed nobody from a nation that had just spent 18 years bowing to a foreign king. And what he does next is one of the strangest, boldest, most quietly hilarious stories in the whole book of Judges. Stick around, because by the end of this video you'll understand not just what Ehud did, but why God let things get so bad in the first place, and what that means for the mess you might be sitting in right now. Let's get into it. To understand Ehud, you first have to understand the pattern he was born into. After the Israelites entered the Promised Land under Joshua, things were good for a while. But Joshua died, and the generation after him grew up not really knowing what God had done for their parents and grandparents. So they drifted. They started worshiping the local gods of the land instead of the God who'd brought them out of slavery in Egypt and given them this land in the first place. God allows a foreign power to oppress them as a consequence. The people cry out for help. God raises up a deliverer, a judge, to rescue them. Peace returns. For a while. Then the cycle starts again. This time, the oppressor is a man named Eglon, the king of Moab. Now, a little geography here. Moab was a kingdom just east of the Jordan River and the Dead Sea, right on Israel's doorstep. The Moabites and Israelites had a long, complicated history. Some family ties way back, plenty of tension too. And Eglon saw an opportunity. He teamed up with the Ammonites and the Amalekites, basically forming a coalition, and he attacked Israel. And he didn't just win a battle. He settled in. He set up shop. For 18 years, Israel served King Eglon of Moab. 18 years is a long time. Think about that. A person born under that oppression could grow up, get married, and have children who had never once known freedom. 18 years of paying tribute, taxes, forced labor, submission, to a foreign king because of choices their community had made long before some of them were even born. And here's a detail the text goes out of its way to mention. Eglon was a very fat man. That's not a throwaway insult. Keep that detail in your back pocket. The storyteller is planting a seed, and it's going to pay off in a big way in about 15 minutes. Eventually, Israel does what they always do in this cycle. They cry out to the Lord, and God, faithful even when his people aren't, raises up a deliverer. His name is Ehud, son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin. And here's the detail that matters most. Ehud was left-handed. Now, that might sound like a small, random biographical note, the kind of thing you'd skip over, but in the culture of the time, being left-handed wasn't just unusual. Right-handedness was the assumed default for everything, including combat. Swords were worn on the left hip so a right-handed man could draw quickly across his body. Guards would have been trained to watch a visitor's right hand, right hip, right side, because that's where danger was supposed to come from. Ehud's disability, as some translations even phrase it, was about to become his greatest weapon. Nobody would be looking for a blade on the right side of his body, because nobody expected a threat from a left-handed man. The story picks up with something surprisingly ordinary. Taxes. Every so often, Israel was required to send tribute to King Eglon, a formal payment acknowledging his rule over them. It was Ehud's job, or at least his role in this moment, to be part of the delegation that carried this tribute to the king. Now picture the scene. A group of Israelite men, likely carrying gifts, gold, produce, whatever the tribute consisted of, making the journey to Eglon's court to hand it over. It's a humiliating errand. It's a physical reminder every single time of exactly who's in charge. But Ehud isn't just going through the motions. He's planning something. Before he leaves, he makes himself a weapon, a double-edged sword, but a short one about 1.5 feet long or roughly 45 centimeters. Small enough to conceal. Short enough that it wouldn't be visible under normal clothing. And crucially, he straps it to his right thigh under his clothes. Remember what we said about right-handed assumptions. Any guard patting someone down, any guard scanning a room for danger, is trained to check the left side, because that's where a sword typically hangs for right-handed use. Ehud's blade is hidden exactly where nobody is looking. He and the delegation travel to wherever Eglon is holding court, present the tribute, and everything goes exactly as expected. Formal, tense, humiliating, but uneventful. And then Ehud sends everyone else home. This is the moment where the story slows down and you realize this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. This was a plan with stages. Ehud dismisses the men who carried the tribute with him. They start heading back toward Israelite territory. But Ehud turns around. He goes back. The text tells us he stopped at a location described as the idols near Gilgal. Some translations say carved images or sculptured stones. This detail matters more than it might seem. Gilgal, remember, is the very place where Israel first camped after crossing the Jordan into the Promised Land under Joshua. A site soaked in memory of God's faithfulness. And now there are idols there. It's a small, aching picture of exactly how far Israel has drifted. Sacred ground for God's people has become cluttered with foreign gods. Ehud walks right past them. Then he returns to Eglon's court alone and says something that changes everything. I have a secret message for you, O king. Think about how carefully chosen that line is. Eglon is a king who's just received his tribute. His ego thoroughly stroked by a nation bowing to him. And now here's a message specifically for him. Something private. Something important enough that it needs to be delivered in confidence. Eglon takes the bait immediately. He commands the room to be cleared. All his attendants, his guards presumably, step out. And this is where the text gives us one more small, telling detail. Eglon was sitting alone in his upper room, a cool roof chamber that he had made for himself. It's a picture of luxury. A private, air-conditioned retreat, if you want to think of it in modern terms, a room built for a comfortable, self-indulgent life. The king who's been living off 18 years of somebody else's labor is sitting in the nicest room in the building, about to hear a message meant just for him. Ehud approaches, and he says, I have a message from God for you. And in that half-second, everything changes. Because when Ehud said secret message the first time, Eglon probably assumed it was political. Some intelligence, some warning, maybe even an offer of loyalty. But a message from God is something else entirely. It's the kind of statement that would make a king instinctively rise to his feet out of respect, or reverence, or maybe just startled uncertainty about what he's about to hear. And that's exactly what happens. Eglon rises from his seat. And that's when Ehud reaches with his left hand. The hand nobody was watching. Draws the hidden sword from his right thigh, and drives it into Eglon's stomach. Now here's where the text gets almost uncomfortably specific. The sword goes in so deep that even the handle disappears into Eglon's body, because, and the text tells us this directly, Eglon was an extremely heavy man. Remember that detail from earlier? This is the payoff. The very thing that made Eglon look powerful and comfortable, his size, becomes almost grotesquely undignified in this moment. Ehud doesn't even pull the blade back out. He leaves it there and walks out, locking the doors of the room behind him. Now imagine the scene outside that room. Eglon's servants are waiting in the hallway. Time passes. Nothing happens. No summons, no voice, no movement. And the text tells us exactly what they assumed. They thought the king was relieving himself in his cool chamber. It's blunt, and honestly, it's a little bit funny, which some scholars believe is intentional. The Book of Judges isn't afraid to let its villains look ridiculous. And there's a kind of dark comedy in the guards standing outside, too embarrassed or too deferential to check on their king, while he lies dead on the floor. They wait, and wait, long enough that it becomes awkward, even alarming. Eventually they can't ignore it any longer, so they get the key and open the doors, and there's their king dead on the floor. And by this point, Ehud is long gone. While Eglon's servants were standing around outside a locked door assuming the worst kept secret in the ancient world, Ehud had already slipped past the idols at Gilgal, crossed back into safer territory, and made it to the hill country of Ephraim. And here's where the story shifts from a daring assassination to something much bigger, a national uprising. Ehud blows a trumpet in the hill country, a signal, a rallying cry, and declares to the Israelites who gather, "Follow me, for the Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." Notice what he does there. He doesn't say, "I killed their king." Now let's finish the job. He gives the credit to God immediately. The victory over Eglon wasn't a personal triumph to be celebrated for its own sake. It was a signal that God had opened the door for the whole nation's deliverance. And the people respond. They go down with Ehud and they seize the fords of the Jordan River, the shallow crossing points that the fleeing, leaderless Moabite forces would desperately need to get back to their own territory. It's a brilliant tactical move. With their king dead and confusion spreading, the Moabite soldiers try to retreat across the Jordan, only to find Israel already controlling the crossings. The text tells us that about 10,000 Moabites die that day, described as robust and valiant men, meaning these weren't stragglers. This was the core of Moab's fighting strength. Not a single one escapes. And just like that, in the space of one day, the balance of power flips entirely. A nation that had been paying tribute for 18 years is suddenly free. Moab is subdued under Israel's hand. And then comes one of the most beautiful lines in the whole book of Judges. So the land had rest for 80 years. 80 years. Let that sink in. Longer than most people's entire lifetimes in the ancient world. 2, maybe 3 full generations grew up never knowing what it was like to bow to King Eglon, because one overlooked, left-handed man was willing to walk back into a palace alone. So what do we actually do with a story like this? It's violent, it's strange, and on the surface it might seem like it doesn't have much to say to modern life. But look a little closer, and there's a lot here. First, God works through the people the world overlooks. Ehud wasn't a general. He wasn't royalty. He wasn't even fully normal by the standards of his day. His left-handedness, in a right-handed world, marked him as different, maybe even as lesser. And that's exactly who God used. This is a pattern that runs through the entire Bible. Second, consequences are real, but so is deliverance. It's worth being honest about the first part of this story. The 18 years of oppression didn't come out of nowhere. The text is clear that this happened because Israel had turned away from God. But here's the other half of that truth. God doesn't abandon people to those consequences forever. The moment Israel cried out, God was already moving to raise up their rescue. If you're in a season that feels like the result of past mistakes, yours or not even yours, this story says the story isn't over. Crying out still matters. Third, boldness looks different depending on the moment. Ehud's version of courage wasn't charging into an army with a raised sword. It was walking calmly back into a palace, alone, with a concealed weapon and a carefully chosen lie about a secret message. It was patient. It was strategic. It required nerve, yes, but a very quiet, controlled kind of nerve. Not every act of faith looks like a dramatic battle scene. So that's the story of Ehud, the left-handed deliverer, the overlooked man who ended 18 years of oppression with a hidden blade and a carefully chosen lie, and who gave his nation 80 years of peace. It's a strange story. It's a bold story. And underneath all the specific, almost uncomfortable detail, it's a story about a God who works through unlikely people, in unlikely ways, to bring deliverance to people who've cried out for help. If this story is new to you, it comes from the book of Judges, chapter 3, and it's worth reading in full. There's even more texture in the original text than we had time to cover here. If you enjoyed this retelling, consider subscribing to Animated Altar. We bring these stories to life one overlooked hero at a time. And if there's a story from Scripture you'd like us to cover next, drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.